Welcome to Explore English Online. Let's get started.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the English Learning Tips Podcast. I'm your host, Smith, and I'm so glad you've decided to join us today. Whether you're commuting, relaxing at home, or just looking for some inspiration on your English learning journey, you're in the right place. Today, I have a very special guest with me, our co-host, Sarah.
Hi, everyone. It's so great to be here. Smith, I'm really excited about today's topic. I think it's going to resonate with a lot of people.
Absolutely, Sarah. Today, we're diving into something that can completely transform the way you approach learning English. Our topic is Learn English Smarter, Not Harder. It's all about how you can maximize your efforts and achieve better results without feeling overwhelmed or stuck.
That's right. Learning a new language, especially one as globally important as English, can sometimes feel like climbing a huge mountain. But what if I told you that with the right strategies, you could make the climb much easier and even more enjoyable?
Now, before we jump into the tips and strategies, let's talk about why this topic is so important. Learning English is a big goal for millions of people worldwide, whether for better job opportunities, traveling, or simply connecting with others. But here's the catch. It's not just about working hard, it's about working smart.
Exactly. Many learners make the mistake of spending hours memorizing grammar rules or vocabulary lists, only to find that they still struggle to have a simple conversation. It can be so frustrating.
It really can. And one of the biggest challenges people face is time constraints. Let's be honest, most of us have busy lives. Whether it's work, school, or family responsibilities, finding the time to dedicate to English learning can feel impossible.
That's so true. And then there's the issue of lack of direction. A lot of learners don't know where to start or what to focus on. Should they watch movies in English? Should they spend more time on grammar? Or is speaking practice the most important? It's easy to feel lost.
Another common challenge is frustration. When progress feels slow, it's easy to get discouraged. You might think, why am I even doing this? Am I ever going to be fluent?
But here's the thing. English isn't just a skill. It's a tool for opportunities. And if you approach it the right way, you'll not only save time but also see faster progress, which is incredibly motivating.
Absolutely. That's what this episode is all about. We're going to break down the most effective ways to learn smarter so that you can get better results with less stress. By the end of this episode, you'll walk away with actionable tips and a fresh perspective on how to tackle your English learning journey.
And remember, learning smarter doesn't mean cutting corners. It means focusing on what works and letting go of what doesn't. Trust us, it's going to change the way you learn.
So, stay tuned as we dive into this important topic. Let's start exploring what it really means to learn smarter, not harder. Ready, Sarah?
Let's do it, Smith.
All right. Let's dive into our first segment. Understanding smarter, not harder. This phrase sounds great, but what does it really mean when it comes to learning English? Sarah, do you want to start us off?
Of course, Smith. When we talk about learning smarter, we're talking about strategies that help you achieve the same or even better results without wasting time or energy. It's not about cutting corners, but about using your time and resources efficiently. For example, Instead of trying to memorize hundreds of random vocabulary words from a list, you focus on learning words that are directly relevant to your daily life or work. You learn them in context, so they actually stick in your memory and become useful when you need them.
That makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of people get caught up in this idea that learning English means spending hours and hours studying every day. But the truth is, those hours don't matter if you're not studying the right way. Let's compare this to some traditional methods people often rely on. One of the most common is memorization. Whether it's vocabulary lists or grammar rules, you sit down, repeat them over and over, and hope they'll magically stick.
Yes, and while memorization can help to a degree, it's not the most effective way to actually use English. You might remember the definition of a word, but when it comes time to use it in a sentence or conversation, you freeze because you haven't practiced it in a real-world context.
Exactly. Another common approach is repetitive grammar drills. How many of us have spent hours filling in the blanks of grammar worksheets? While that might help you understand the rules, it doesn't teach you how to naturally apply those rules when you're speaking or writing.
Right. And then there's the idea that you need to be perfect. Some learners obsess over speaking without making any mistakes. They focus so much on getting every word and every sentence right that they never actually practice speaking freely. That's another example of working harder, not smarter.
So, what does learning smarter actually look like? Let's talk about some smarter techniques that can replace these traditional methods. One of my favorites is contextual learning. Instead of learning a word like run on its own, you learn it in a sentence or scenario. I run every morning. Or, can you run to the store for me? This way, you're not just memorizing the word. You're understanding how it's used in everyday life.
Another great example is active use. Instead of passively reading or listening to English, you actively engage with it. For instance, if you're watching a TV show, pause it and repeat a line out loud. Try to mimic the pronunciation and intonation. Or if you're reading a story, stop and summarize it in your own words.
That's a powerful one. And it's something you can do even if you don't have a partner to practice with. Speaking of which, Sarah, let's shift gears a little and talk about some common mistakes learners make when they're not learning smarter.
One big mistake I see is focusing too much on grammar without application. Some learners know every rule about verb tenses, but they've never tried to use those tenses in a conversation. The result? They freeze up when they have to speak because they're overthinking the rules.
That's such a good point. Another mistake is spending too much time on isolated skills. For example, someone might focus only on listening but never try to speak. Or they might spend all their time reading without practicing pronunciation.
I've also noticed that learners sometimes stick to the same methods, even when they're not working. If you've been trying to learn with the same textbook for months and you're not seeing progress, it's time to try something new.
Here's a quick anecdote about that. I once met a student who was frustrated because he couldn't remember vocabulary. When I asked how he was studying, he said he was making flashcards and reviewing them every night. I suggested he try using the words in sentences instead. After just a week, he told me he was remembering the words much better because he was connecting them to real situations.
That's such a great example. And I have one too. A friend of mine used to write down every grammar rule she learned in a notebook, but she never practiced speaking. One day she joined a language exchange group, and within a month, her confidence in speaking skyrocketed.
Those stories are proof that smarter techniques really do work. By focusing on what's practical and useful, you can save time, reduce frustration, and actually enjoy the learning process.
Exactly. So, if you're listening to this and you feel like you've been stuck or not making progress, don't worry. We're going to help you reframe your approach to learning English so you can move forward with confidence.
That's the perfect segue into our next segment, where we'll share specific strategies for learning smarter. Stay tuned. In this segment, we're diving into key strategies for learning smarter, not harder. These are practical tips you can start using right away to make your English learning journey more effective. Let's start with a big one: focusing on communication. Sarah, what's your take on this?
Thanks, Smith. One of the smartest things learners can do is prioritize speaking and listening over perfect grammar, especially in the beginning stages. When you're learning a language, your main goal is to communicate, to share ideas and understand others. That doesn't require perfect grammar, just enough to get your message across.
I couldn't agree more. Too many learners hold themselves back because they're afraid of making mistakes. But guess what? Mistakes are part of the process. In fact, they help you learn faster.
Exactly. Here's a simple tip. Start speaking as soon as possible, even if it's just saying a few sentences. If you're not confident about speaking with others yet, try talking to yourself. For example, narrate your day in English. I'm making coffee now, or I'm going to the store. It might feel silly at first, but it's a great way to build confidence.
And if you don't have a partner to practice with, don't worry. You can record yourself speaking and then listen to it. This not only helps you practice, but also lets you hear your own progress over time. Now, let's talk about another game changer: leveraging technology. Technology has made it easier than ever to learn English. There are so many apps, online courses, and podcasts available.
Absolutely. Some apps like Duolingo and Memrise are fantastic for building vocabulary and practicing with native speakers. Then there are online platforms like YouTube where you can find tutorials and even full English lessons.
And let's not forget about podcasts, like this one. Listening to podcasts is a fantastic way to improve your listening skills and pick up natural expressions. The best part? You can listen while you're doing other things, like exercising or commuting.
That's so true. And here's another way to use technology: integrate English into your daily routine. A simple but powerful step is to change the language on your phone or computer to English. It forces you to interact with the language every day without even thinking about it.
I love that tip. Another idea is to set reminders or alarms in English, or even write your to-do list in English. These small changes add up over time and help you stay immersed in the language.
Now let's move on to another important strategy: learning in context. This means focusing on real-life situations and using English in meaningful ways. Smith, do you want to explain how this works?
Sure. When you learn vocabulary or phrases in context, they're much easier to remember. For example, instead of memorizing the word eat, learn it in a sentence like, I eat breakfast at 8 a.m. Or better yet, associate it with a real-life experience, like actually sitting down to eat while thinking about the word.
That's a great example. Watching movies or TV shows in English is another fantastic way to learn in context. Pay attention to how characters use phrases in different situations. You're not just learning the words, you're learning when and how to use them naturally.
And let's not forget about stories. Reading simple English stories or listening to audiobooks is a fun and effective way to pick up new vocabulary. You'll also start to notice patterns in sentence structures, which helps improve your grammar without needing to memorize rules.
That's so true. Here's an example. If you read a story about someone going to the beach, you might learn words like sand, waves, and swim together. Because they're connected in a meaningful way, you're more likely to remember them.
The key takeaway here is that context helps your brain make connections, and those connections make learning faster and more enjoyable. So, whether it's watching a movie, reading a book, or just talking about your daily life, always try to learn English in context.
Exactly. And remember, these strategies aren't just smarter, they're also more fun. When you enjoy the process, you're more likely to stick with it and see real progress.
Well said, Sarah. In our next segment, we'll discuss how to stay consistent and motivated as you learn. Stay tuned. In this segment, we'll be talking about something every English learner faces at some point: overcoming common challenges. Whether it's staying motivated or dealing with plateaus, we've got practical tips to help you keep moving forward. Let's start with motivation, Sarah.
Thanks, Smith. Staying motivated is often one of the hardest parts of learning English. At the beginning, everything feels exciting. You're learning new words, trying new apps, and making progress quickly. But after a while, that excitement can wear off, especially if the results aren't coming as fast as you'd like.
That's so true. I think one of the keys to maintaining enthusiasm is setting realistic goals. If your goal is too big, like, I want to be fluent in 6 months, it can feel overwhelming and discouraging when you don't see immediate progress.
Exactly. Instead, break that big goal into smaller, more manageable steps. For example, aim to learn 10 new words this week or to watch one English video every day for a month. These smaller goals are easier to achieve and give you a sense of accomplishment along the way.
Speaking of accomplishments, celebrating small milestones is so important. When you achieve something, like finishing a book in English or having your first conversation with a native speaker, take a moment to acknowledge it. Reward yourself. It keeps the process enjoyable and reminds you of how far you've come.
That's a great point. And don't forget to track your progress. Keeping a journal or even just marking off completed goals on a checklist can help you see how much you're improving, even if it doesn't always feel obvious.
Now, let's talk about something that can be really frustrating: learning plateaus. Sarah, have you ever experienced a plateau when learning a language?
Oh, definitely. A learning plateau is when it feels like you're no longer making progress, even though you're putting in the effort. It's very common, especially once you've moved past the beginner stage.
Why does that happen?
Well, in the early stages, everything you learn feels new and exciting. But as you advance, the improvements become smaller and harder to notice. You might still be learning, but it doesn't feel as rewarding because the progress isn't as obvious.
That makes sense. So, what can learners do to overcome plateaus?
One strategy is to switch things up. If you've been using the same methods for a while, try something new. For example, if you've been focused on listening, start practicing more speaking. Or if you've been studying alone, consider joining a language exchange group or taking a class.
That's a great idea. Another tip is to take short breaks. Sometimes your brain just needs time to process everything you've learned. A week off might actually help you come back feeling refreshed and more motivated.
Absolutely. And remember, plateaus are normal. They're not a sign that you're failing. Be patient with yourself and trust the process.
So, to sum up this segment, stay motivated by setting realistic goals, celebrating small wins, and tracking your progress. And if you hit a plateau, don't panic. Change your approach. Take a break if needed, and keep going.
Exactly. Learning English is a journey, and every step, big or small, is progress. In our final segment, we'll answer some common questions from our listeners. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to the final segment of today's episode. We've talked about learning smarter, overcoming challenges, and staying motivated. Now it's time to wrap up with some practical takeaways. These are tips you can start using today to supercharge your English learning journey. Let's dive in, Sarah. What's your first tip?
Thanks, Smith. My first tip is simple but powerful. Make English part of your daily life. Try to incorporate the language into your routine as much as possible. For example, listen to English podcasts or music while commuting, or set your social media feeds to English.
That's a great one. My tip is to focus on speaking, even if you're not perfect. Find ways to practice. Record yourself. Talk to a language exchange partner, or even chat with AI language apps. Don't worry about mistakes. They're a natural part of learning.
Exactly. My second tip is to use spaced repetition for vocabulary. Apps like Anki or Quizlet can help you review words at the right intervals so they stick in your memory. This is much more effective than cramming.
Good point. And here's another idea. Read and listen to content you enjoy. Whether it's a story, a movie, or a podcast, engaging with material that interests you makes the learning process enjoyable and memorable.
That's so true. My next tip is to set specific, achievable goals. For example, instead of saying, "I want to improve my English," aim for something like, "I will learn 10 new words this week," or "I will practice speaking for 15 minutes a day."
Love that. My next tip builds on it. Track your progress. Whether it's a journal, an app, or just a checklist, keeping track of what you've achieved keeps you motivated and shows you how far you've come.
Another great strategy is to immerse yourself in English conversations. If you can't travel, try joining online communities or discussion groups where English is spoken.
And my final tip, be patient and consistent. Learning a language takes time. The key is to show up every day, even if it's just for a few minutes. Consistency beats intensity in the long run. All right, we've shared some actionable tips. Now, Sarah, I know you've got some motivational words for our listeners before we wrap up.
Absolutely, Smith. To all our listeners, learning English is a journey, not a race. It's okay to feel frustrated or stuck at times. Those feelings are part of growth. Remember why you started and focus on how far you've come, not just how far you have to go.
Beautifully said, Sarah.
Thank you, Smith. And remember, every small step you take brings you closer to your goal. You are capable, you are improving, and you've got this.
What a fantastic way to end today's episode. Thank you, Sarah, for sharing these tips and encouragement.
Thank you, Smith, and thanks to all of our listeners for tuning in.
We hope these tips help you learn English smarter, not harder. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode with anyone who might find it helpful. See you next time. And that's a wrap for today's episode. Let's quickly recap the key points we covered. First, we discussed the importance of learning English smarter, not harder, focusing on communication, context, and consistency, rather than relying on traditional, repetitive methods.
Yes, we explored how smarter learning means using techniques like active speaking, listening, and integrating English into your daily life. Plus, we talked about overcoming challenges like motivation dips and learning plateaus, reminding you to keep pushing forward and adjust your strategies when needed.
Exactly. We also shared some practical tips. Make English part of your routine, set achievable goals, track your progress, and always be consistent. Remember, learning a language is a journey, not a race.
So now it's your turn. We encourage you to put these smarter learning strategies into practice. Start small, stay consistent, and be patient with yourself.
And don't forget to share your thoughts with us. Leave a comment below with any questions or tips of your own. If you found this episode helpful, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an update.
Next week, we'll dive into how to build your confidence when speaking English, a topic we know many of you are excited about.
We can't wait to see you there. Thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, keep learning smarter, not harder.